For those of us who are passionate gardeners and we spend our life gardening, and the garden that we end up creating is really our soul. You know, it's an expression of our whole lives. The people we've known are all out there in the plants that they've shared with us and plants that we associate with them. And the places we've been, they're all out there. And so the garden really becomes an outward expression of who you are. And the garden is always changing, I guess, because I'm always changing. And in my case, it's kind of weird. Because I'm a little weird, I suppose. So I think the technical term for it is I'm a plant nerd. I'm the kind of person I'm constantly looking at plantings and what the plants are. And it's just kind of like some people notice every kind of car, and other people will notice all sorts of details about a house. I'm a plant guy. There's alpines and rock garden plants, which are really my favorites. Although dryland plants are right up there, and succulents. Gardening is a lot like wine. You know, we all have our terroirs, and mine is Colorado. This is what I know. I can't imagine living anywhere else, because this is my character. I've crammed as many different plants as I possibly can. There's probably well over 1,000 different kinds of plants in the rock garden. Of course, the whole garden probably has 5,000 or 6,000 species, which is twice as many as are wild in the entire state of Colorado. So it's not what you would call natural, but it's certainly it's an extravagance of sorts. I mean, we're really dealing with profound mysteries when you deal with gardening. It's an art, and it certainly has its scientific aspects. I mean, there's, you know, horticulture is a scientific endeavor, but the truth be said, a lot of it is very magical. You plant a seed and it germinates and it grows. I mean, that's amazing. You're talking about phenomenally complex phenomena. And here I have a garden with thousands of plants in it, different kinds of plants, and we're trying to grow them in harmony. What's that all about? There's absolutely no question that in my case, my garden is a microcosm of the world at large. Because I travel at places, I see plants, and sometimes I have permits to collect them, and so I bring them back. And so my garden connects me to the entire world. And so I don't just grow a plant for its intrinsic merits, which of course are great, but often because of it has associations for me. Oh, what a smell. I just love this thing. This is Clematis manchurica, which was actually collected in Mongolia by my friend Harlan Hammernick. Harlan was he and his wife started Bluebird Nursery in Clarkston, Nebraska, and which is one of the great nurseries of America that supplies Denver with a lot of its perennials. Anyway, he was a very dear friend of mine, and he collected many treasures. And this is one of his finest plants. So this is my kind of plant. It has a story, and I look at it and I think of Harlan that we used to, you know, hang out and trade plants with, and he'd visit, and I'd visit him. And he's gone. He died about 6-7 years ago now, I suppose, but he still lives on in his clematis. So this is a cactus that comes from Carlsbad Caverns. It's quite rare in nature. It's extremely easy to grow in gardens, but this specimen was a gift from Sandy Snyder. She and I worked together for 17 years, and she's one of my dearest friends. And you know, there's not a plant you can point to that isn't a story. For example, on the waterfall, there are these little silvery tuffets. They're Dittany of Crete, and it's an oregano that comes from my ancestral island where my parents were born. And it's probably the most famous plant from Crete. And it's considered almost impossible to grow, not very hardy. And well, it grows on cliffs. Well, I have a little cliff, and so I thought, well, if I put it on the cliff there, but rock gardening is really about growing alpine plants and high mountain plants. One of the things that I've done as a professional rock gardener has been to shift. You know, I still grow, for example, in the bog there's a primrose from the Himalayas, and the yellow monkey flower that you see there, those are bona fide high mountain plants The primrose grows up at 15,000 feet in the Himalayas. I've actually seen it there. And I grow lots of alpine plants. But more and more, what I sort of have brought an awareness to the rock garden community is that some of the best rock plants actually grow at low elevations. Plants from the steppe regions and from the Mediterranean region. So many of the plants in my garden are actually Mediterranean plants, and many of them are African plants because I was one of the first botanists to go to South Africa when apartheid was repealed. So this field of specialists who really do this with great passion is a group of people that I've been involved with all my life since I was a kid. Because one of my heroes when I was a kid, Paul Maslin, who lived not far from me, was very active in the Rock Garden Society, and he and I started the local Denver group. I've always gardened at home when I was a little kid. I grew up in Boulder. My parents had a big vegetable garden, and that's where they loved to grow vegetables. You know, they're old world, you know, they're both from Europe and Greece, and so the vegetables what mattered, and the rest of it was kind of threadbare and not very impressive. And Boulder being such a beautiful town, you know, I thought it should be prettier. And it was actually my brother-in-law moved in, and he built a huge rock garden on the north side of the house. Well, it was huge for me back then. And I helped him, and it was just such a wonderful experience. So I became the crew that did everything but the vegetable garden. I put in flower gardens, you know, I mowed the lawn. And that was really when I was, you know, in single digits. I started, you know, 8, 9 years old. And so gardening is in my blood. And I kind of floundered through my 20s till I pretty much ended at the Botanic Gardens by a series of wonderful flukes. And because I'd always been gardening, when they built a big rock garden, we had a rock garden club, and I ended up becoming a consultant to the architect who built that garden, Herb Schall, who's still alive and well, bless him, up in Fort Collins. And Herb really liked me, so he told him, you know, you built this garden, nobody on the staff knows anything about it, hire this guy. And they did. So that was way back in 1980, and I just turned 30, so you can do the math. I was just absolutely so thrilled. Although the gardens back then was not what it is now. Over the years, the garden's transformed, and now it's really the garden of my dreams. I think we have one of the most extraordinary public gardens in the world. This time of year I'll come out and see what's blooming now. The nice thing about a rock garden is after you do it, it kind of settles down to a dull roar. And this one, I suppose if you had one thing you could compare a rock garden to, it would be a kaleidoscope, you know, because it's so changing. It changes, it's constantly shifting, and things pop up and die down and bloom. And so it's very entertaining for somebody who's into it like me. And but it also has a textural appeal. All these things kind of fit together like a mosaic or a tapestry. So it's a very a textural type of garden. You saw the Greek oregano. Oreganos are probably one of the plants I'm best known for. I've written articles about them, and I've helped introduce several of them to cultivation. This is a hybrid that just appeared in my garden spontaneously, and I've left it because it's pretty spectacular. This one's called Kent Beauty. It's an old hybrid that was produced in England 50 or 60 years ago, and they all have a wonderful aroma when you touch them. This is one from Turkey that comes from southern Turkey, and it has lime green flowers. You'll see it has a trunk like a tree in here from the roots. They have great big roots underneath. This has been here for probably 20 years. It was collected by my friend Jim Archibald in southern Turkey, and it's a plant I really treasure. I have a couple of them around. And then there's some Nepophias. Those are the torch lilies, and this one is the most important medicinal Nepophia. It's harvested rather heavily in the country of Lesotho, and it's used for quite a number of different medicinal purposes. And I'm quite sure that's the best specimen in North America, probably one of the few. And I'm really proud of it now because it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 flower heads coming into bloom right now. So this is one of my pride and joys down here. This is a Himalayan maidenhair fern. some people would look at this and they'd say, this is kind of looks like a weed patch. And of course, it does look a little like a weed patch, but needless to say, this is a mullein from, again, it comes from the Mediterranean. And it doesn't look like any other mullein because it has very finely divided leaves. But I just love this thing. So I've created this bed pretty much to show off it's such a delicate flower. And, I don't think you could buy this anywhere in the United States. You'd have to grow it from seed from a Rock Garden Society exchange perhaps. But I have this all over my yard because it's one of my signature plants. It's just a little strip, but it's a shady strip. And this is where I grow a lot of my woodland plants, which I'm very, very fond of. And then I have a little patch of succulents over here. But this garden here is, most people think on the north side of their house, what would I grow there? Well, I'm growing probably 20 different kinds of ferns here. And then these little jack-in-the-pulpits. It's a jack-in-the-pulpit from China that comes from Western China called Erythema candidissimum, which I think is just an absolutely gorgeous flower. And then here you can see the last of the plants that I haven't planted yet for my spring's orgy of buying from various garden centers and whatnot. This woodland garden gives me a great deal of pleasure because when I grew up as a kid in Boulder, we had a very shady garden. And I grew a lot of ferns back then, a lot of woodland plants. And this is kind of a recreation of that garden. So gardening is an extremely emotional a sport in a way. We have such lawn worship in America. And I actually have one of the nicest lawns I know. And I do nothing to it. I don't aerate it. I don't fertilize it. I just mow it and water it and let clover grow in it. And the clover provides the nutrients for the lawn. I don't put poisons on it. From a distance, it looks like a beautiful flower garden, and the front is meant to be a flower garden, but actually beyond that, where you see all the red back there, the red is amaranth, and it's there primarily for its attractive foliage, although amaranth does produce the grain. But in there, that's a big vegetable garden, and it's quite productive. This is the back 40 of my garden is the dry part. When you have a half acre in Denver, you really can't water a half acre unless you're a millionaire. When we designed the garden, we decided to make this half of the garden unwatered. It has my collection of succulents that I take indoors. These verbascums, these mulleins with the big yellow flowers, are beautiful in the morning. This is actually a species that comes from a mountain in Turkey. The Turks call it Uludağ, but the ancient Greeks called it Olympus. It was the Bithynian Olympus, the Olympus of Asia Minor. But it certainly loves my garden, as you can see. I don't plant any of these, they just plant themselves. It's kind of scary for people when they first come and they look at it. And, all these cacti, all this weird stuff, but I love it. And actually, a lot of my more sophisticated gardening friends are really impressed with this garden because it's totally unusual. And guess what? We really don't have to water, and that's kind of cool. This is actually our native grass that grows naturally here, blue grama grass. And it's full of bulbs in the springtime. The prickly poppies haven't opened up today yet. They're very beautiful, huge white flowers in the daytime, but they don't open up till later on. Those are natural on the property here as well. We never planted these, but they popped up all over the property, and I leave them because the flowers are spectacular. And likewise, this is sand sage. There were once probably millions of these growing in Aurora on all the sandy areas of the city. Oops, a weed. The enemy is cheatgrass. And at any rate, this is one of my least favorite weeds here, this green thing. This is poverty weed. I have to confess, there's lots of things about gardening that I find tiresome. There's certain areas of the garden where I really don't want to go work, and they do get out of control. And there's certain tasks that I know I should have done a long time ago and I didn't do. So it's like any activity that we engage in as humans. Much of what we do in life is routine. And routine can become deadly, or it can become something that you celebrate. You know, we all brush our teeth day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out. Is that a horrible thing? Or, you know, do you go up before you brush your teeth and go, oh God, I've done this 1,000 times, why aren't they clean now? You know, it's just something you have to do. And gardening has lots of things you just have to do. So every task that you take on, you have a choice. You can make it into a battle, or you can make it into a game. I could suffer and go and weed it, or I could go over and have fun and do it. And everything is a matter of will and choice. This is called chi grass, and it comes from Central Asia. This is Achnanthrum splendens. 2009 we went to Mongolia and to Kazakhstan, and this grows on the steppes of Central Asia. And it turns out it's been very important to the people of Central Asia. And for millennia, they've used it for basketry, the leaves. It has all sorts of other economic uses. In other words, it's probably the great grass of Asia. So the thought that this plant, you know, has served so much of our culture forever. Achnanthrum splendens, one of the great plants. Isn't that glorious? And it looks beautiful all summer long. And as it progresses, you can see the seeds. It's in full bloom right now. They're all my favorite plants. Somebody once said, Panayoti, how can you like every plant? It's kind of like, how can you like every song by your favorite singer, right? Or I have a bit of missionary zeal to get people to also share that, because it's such a rich thing, you know, to be able to go anywhere and be entertained, you know. I don't watch television. Why should I? I have the plant kingdom, you know, which is, you know, it feeds us, it clothes us, it protects us, it gives us oxygen, you know. So that's part of my mission in my life, is to awake people to the fact that they're surrounded by the most marvelous creatures on earth that can turn sunlight into carbohydrate, and that you know, clean the air and do all these marvelous things. And they're quietly and peacefully performing for us. I think I've preserved my sort of childish and childlike wonder. I just never cease to be shocked at how you plant a seed or you plant a plant, and it just takes off, you know, and it keeps morphing. And for me, that watching those transformations from day to day is, I mean, I wake up in the morning, it's like Christmas, and you know, what's blooming today, you know, and I run around, and you know, that is something which I think lies at the heart of all gardening, is a sense of amazement and wonder at the power of plants.